The Indiana Supreme Court has set an October 10th execution date for convicted killer Roy Lee Ward. Ward was sentenced to death after he raped and murdered a 15-year-old girl in 2001. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita asked the Supreme Court to set a date in June. Ward's lawyers tried to delay the execution, citing new evidence that the...
On July 11, 2001, in the morning, 15-year-old Stacy Payne began getting ready for another ordinary school day. Her mother had already left for work. Her younger sister was staying with relatives. At approximately 9:30 a.m., a family friend arrived at the Payne residence, planning to give Stacy a ride. She knocked once, then again, no answer. Through the screen door, she called out Stacy's name, but there was only silence. Something deep inside her said something was terribly wrong. She turned the doorknob. It was unlocked, and as she stepped inside, the smell of blood hit her before she even reached the bedroom. What she found would haunt her forever. Stacy Payne lay motionless on her bed. Her throat had been slashed, and there were unmistakable signs of sexual assault. The room was a scene of horror-torn sheets, a shattered lamp, and blood spattered across the walls. The morning light, once soft and golden, now illuminated tragedy. When police arrived, they immediately sealed off the area. Detectives from Perry County and Indiana State Police crowded the scene. Their radios crackled with urgency. Nothing like this had ever happened here, not to a child, not in broad daylight, and not in Tell City. Reporters would later describe the crime scene as unimaginable, even for seasoned investigators. The violence was intimate, frenzied, and deeply personal. Whoever did this hadn't just killed Stacy. They had destroyed her innocence, her future, her peace. As word spread, the entire community descended into grief and disbelief. Parents locked their doors. Teenagers refused to walk alone. And amid the chaos, rumors began to circulate about a drifter seen near the woods, about a man asking for water earlier that morning, about the possibility that the killer was still nearby. Investigators canvassed the area, interviewing neighbors and checking local motels. They found witnesses who described a man in his 20s, wearing jeans and a dirty t-shirt, walking barefoot near the Payne residence around the time of the murder. He had been seen knocking on doors, asking for a drink of water, stranger in a town that didn't see many. For hours, police followed trail after trail, hoping one would lead to Stacy's killer. But by midday, one clue would set everything in motion. A set of muddy footprints leading away from the Payne house, through the backyard, and into a nearby field. They were the first tangible trace of the man who had turned an ordinary morning into a nightmare. By evening, the small town of Tell City was no longer the safe haven it once had been. Patrol cars lined the streets, helicopters hovered overhead, parents clutched their children tighter, and as investigators pieced together the events of that morning, one truth began to emerge. The killer hadn't come to kill. He had come looking for something else, ... And murder had become the byproduct of his own monstrous impulses. This was no random act of violence. It was a crime that spoke of rage, of addiction, of something dark festering beneath a seemingly ordinary man's surface. And that man's name was Roy Lee Ward. Ward was not a stranger to the law, a 24-year-old drifter with a criminal past. He had been moving from job to job, couch to couch, chasing work and escaping consequences. On that fateful morning, he had been drinking, wandering, and making choices that would condemn him forever. In less than 24 hours, police would find him mud-stained, trembling, and hiding from the world. But on that morning, inside that small white house in Tell City, Stacy Payne's world had already been stolen. On that summer morning, July 11, 2001, Stacy was home alone for only a short time. Her mother had left for work at the Perry County Memorial Hospital. Just after 7:30 a.m., it should have been a normal morning breakfast, music, and getting ready for school. But fate was about to bring someone dangerous to her door. That someone was Roy Lee Ward, a 24-year-old drifter from Kentucky. He had been staying temporarily in the area with friends, working odd jobs, and drinking heavily. People who saw him that morning described him as out of it, barefoot, filthy, and wandering the streets as though lost. Later, he would claim he was simply looking for a drink of water. But the truth, as revealed through police interviews and forensic evidence, was far darker. Ward had been walking down 11th Street, sweating, shirt soaked, his mind clouded by alcohol and anger. He had been up most of the night, restless and aimless. Witnesses recalled seeing him knock on 2 different doors earlier that morning, asking for water. Both homeowners refused to let him in. Then, he approached the Payne residence. The house looked empty, quiet. The curtains were open, and through the window, he could see movement, a teenage girl getting ready for her day. It's believed that curiosity, mixed with impulse and desire, drove Ward to approach the house. He knocked on the door. Stacy, kind-hearted and unsuspecting, answered. When he asked for a drink of water, she turned her back to get it, and that's when the situation spiraled out of control. In a matter of seconds, the ordinary kindness of a young girl became the fatal opportunity for a predator. Ward forced his way into the home. The struggle was violent and chaotic. Stacy fought back fiercely. Claw marks were later found on Ward's chest and arms. In the bedroom, investigators later discovered overturned furniture, a broken lamp, and blood smeared across the sheets and walls. It was clear that she resisted until her final breath. Autopsy reports confirmed that Stacy had been sexually assaulted before her throat was cut, with a kitchen knife found at the scene. The brutality shocked even veteran investigators. One officer described it as a crime of pure rage and domination. Why did Roy Lee Ward do it? That question haunted everyone. The police, the town, and Stacy's grieving family. During interrogation, Ward offered no coherent explanation. He mumbled about drinking, about not meaning to hurt her, about things getting out of hand, but behind his words lay the mind of a man with deep-seated rage and lack of control. Ward had a long history of alcohol abuse and prior criminal behavior, including theft and assault. He had been in and out of county jails across Kentucky and Indiana. But this, what he did to Stacy, was something beyond impulse. It was the eruption of everything dark inside him. Experts who later reviewed his psychological profile noted that Ward showed signs of antisocial personality disorder, impulsivity, lack of empathy, and an inability to regulate anger. He had grown up poor, neglected, and frequently beaten by his father. By his teenage years, he had already been expelled from school and arrested multiple times. But none of that excused what happened that morning. The truth was simple and horrific. Stacy Payne was killed because she opened her door to the wrong person. After the attack, Ward fled the scene barefoot, running through the backyard and into the nearby woods. He carried scratches, blood on his clothes, and the weight of what he had just done. As he stumbled down rural backroads, he tried to wash the blood from his hands in puddles of muddy water. But there was no escaping what had happened inside that house. By the time Stacy's body was discovered around 9:30 a.m., Ward was already miles away, hiding and wandering aimlessly toward Kentucky. Yet his trail was unmistakable. Muddy footprints, torn fabric and bloodstains led straight from the Payne residence toward the fields behind it. Born in 1977 in Davis County, Kentucky, he grew up in a world defined by chaos. Poverty, violence, and addiction ran deep in his family. His childhood was not a story of innocence, but of neglect and survival. Teachers remembered Ward as quiet but volatile, the kind of boy who could switch from silence to fury in seconds. At home, he endured physical abuse from his alcoholic father and emotional abandonment from his mother, who often disappeared for days. By the time he was 14, Ward had dropped out of school entirely, spending his days wandering the streets, picking fights, and experimenting with drugs and alcohol. His teenage years were marked by a string of minor crimes, vandalism, petty theft, trespassing. But as he got older, the crimes grew darker. In his late teens, he was arrested for assault and public intoxication, then later for burglary. The law saw him as a troublemaker. His neighbors saw him as dangerous. But to those who knew him best, Roy was a man spiraling, someone whose anger simmered beneath a thin layer of charm and self-pity. By his early 20s, Ward was already living the life of a drifter. No home, no stable job, no direction. He would hitchhike from county to county, sleep on couches, and work odd construction jobs for cash. He was unpredictable and impulsive. When he drank, which was almost daily, his temper became uncontrollable. Friends said he had two faces, one soft-spoken and calm, the other frightening and violent. In the summer of 2001, Ward had been staying with friends near Tell City, Indiana. He had recently been fired from a local sawmill and was drinking heavily again. People recalled seeing him at local bars, mumbling about needing a new start but doing nothing to find one. On the night before the murder, witnesses said he had been drinking until dawn, wandering barefoot through the streets. By morning, he was restless, dazed, and disoriented. a man teetering on the edge of something catastrophic. Psychologists later described his state that morning as a psychotic spiral fueled by alcohol and sexual compulsion. In simpler terms, he was out of control. When Ward walked down 11th Street that day, he wasn't looking for a specific victim. He was looking for power. Years of frustration, rage, and addiction had hollowed him out. He had failed at everything: work, relationships, sobriety, and his life had become a series of desperate impulses. His motive, investigators later concluded, wasn't premeditated revenge or robbery. It was domination. Roy Lee Ward wanted to feel something, anything that gave him a sense of control. When he saw Stacy Payne through the window of her house, brushing her hair and getting ready for her day, she became the target of that twisted need. She was innocent, kind, and alone, everything he wasn't. And for a man like Ward, that contrast was unbearable. During interrogation, after his arrest, detectives pressed him for answers. "Why her?" they asked. "Why did you do it?" Ward stared blankly at the table, his hands trembling. His voice was low, almost childlike. "I just lost it," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just lost it." But those words offered no comfort to anyone. The brutality of the crime told a different story, a story of control, aggression, and deep-seated anger toward women. Experts who later examined Ward's case said he displayed classic traits of sexual sadism mixed with antisocial personality disorder. In his mind, the act of violence was a way to reclaim a sense of power that his life had stolen from him. In the weeks leading up to his execution, Ward's behavior changed. Prison officials noted that he had grown unusually quiet. Gone were the days of restless pacing and short-tempered outbursts. Instead, he spent long hours reading the Bible, writing letters, and occasionally speaking to the prison chaplain. Those who saw him said he seemed haunted, not by what awaited him, but by the weight of what he had done. One prison guard later recalled that Ward kept a single photo taped to his cell wall, a small picture of his younger self, taken years before the crime. He'd just stare at it, the guard said, like he was trying to remember who that kid used to be. On October 9th, 2025, the day before his scheduled execution, Ward was moved to Death Watch, a small, heavily monitored holding cell near the execution chamber. He was given clean clothes, new sheets, and the right to make one final phone call. He didn't call family. Instead, he called his attorney, who said Ward wanted to own what he did and stop running from it. That night, he slept only a few hours. At dawn, he requested his final meal: fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans, and a slice of pecan pie. He washed it down with a can of Coca-Cola. Prison staff said he ate slowly, quietly, without speaking a word. When asked if he wanted to make a final statement to the press before the execution, he declined at first, but later, he scribbled a short note on a piece of paper and handed it to his attorney. It read, "To the Payne family, I'm sorry. There are no words that can fix what I've done. I pray for your peace and for God's forgiveness." At 7 p.m., Ward was led into the execution chamber, a sterile, pale room with a gurney at its center and two small windows separating him from witnesses. He walked calmly, shackled, but composed. He didn't resist when officers strapped him down. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, some holding signs demanding justice for Stacy, others silently praying. Among the witnesses inside the viewing room were members of Stacy Payne's family. Her mother clutched a locket that held her daughter's picture. 24 years had passed, but the pain on her face looked as raw as it did on that morning in 2001. At 7:13 p.m., the warden asked Ward if he had any final words. He took a deep breath, looked toward the glass where Stacy's family sat, and spoke quietly. "I can't undo what I did. I wish I could. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I hope someday you can forgive me. I pray that God has mercy on my soul." His voice trembled slightly, but his expression was calm. Some witnesses later said it was the first time they had seen real emotion on his face. The warden gave the signal. The execution team began the procedure, a series of chemicals designed to end life swiftly. Within moments, Ward's breathing slowed. His lips moved faintly, as if whispering a prayer. Then, at 7:21 p.m., Roy Lee Ward was pronounced dead. For the Payne family, it was the end of a long and agonizing chapter, though not the end of grief. Outside the prison, reporters gathered around Patricia Payne. Her words were brief but powerful. "Nothing brings Stacy back, but maybe now she can rest." Inside the prison, The chaplain bowed his head over Ward's still body. In the silence of that moment, the story of a life wasted and another stolen finally came full circle. Roy Lee Ward's death did not erase the horror of what he did, but it brought a quiet finality to decades of waiting. For some, it was justice.